So Eric, just so you know, that's 10 million in the U.S. I got to tell you that when I made the first 15 copies at Office Depot, because I'm serious, I was trying to write a story for our 6 children. Kim had been after me. I've always been a writer, but I was writing a story for our 6 kids. Our youngest now is about to turn 22, so they weren't little. And those first 15 copies did everything I ever wanted that book to do. You understand? And the other thing I'd want you to know about the Shack or Crossroads or anything is that everything that mattered to me was in place before I wrote it. My identity, my worth, my value, my significance, my security, my meaning, my purpose, my destiny, my community, my love. It was in place before I wrote the book. The one thing that the book has added to me is that I get to be inside people's holy ground, their stories, because that's holy ground. I think that's why we're born without shoes, because we were intended to walk on holy ground. This is where you see the activity of God, a fire that burns everything that is not of love's kind inside the dirt of our humanity. I grew up in the highlands of New Guinea. Actually, it wasn't Papua, it was Irian. Papua was the Australian side, we were the Dutch side, and they vacated. My sister, I was a year old when we went in there, and my sister was born under a Dutch passport, my brother under a UN passport, my other brother under an Indonesian passport, and they were all born in the same hospital. So there was a lot of transition. But I was a year old, evangelical, Christian Missionary Alliance, CMA missionary kid, evangelical fundamental. And the culture, the tribe that I grew up inside is the Dani, and they were, there was like 40 to 60,000 over 100 square miles. New Guinea has more than 800 unrelated language groups. And I was the first person. When I was 5 years old, I was the informant for Wycliffe when they came in to translate the language. And so that was my world. In fact, I didn't even know consciously until I got to boarding school. I was shipped out to boarding school at 6, but I didn't know prior to that I was white, and it was a huge disappointment. I'm still a little bit ticked off about it, but the valley that we grew up was the Baleen Valley, and the first book ever written about it was called Cannibal Valley, because they were spirit-worshiping, warring tribal people who practiced ritualistic cannibalism. And this afternoon I was thinking about this, and since I am prior to Mr. Piper, I thought, I've got this one photo of when I was a child that kind of fits right here, and if you want to bring it up, you can see it. I call it appetizer. That's me, right? So when I'm telling you this, not like I'm making it up, right? And I'm wearing the headdress, so they're actually following me. I mean, they're running behind. They're not chasing me. And so thank you for that. But I'm right now, I'm just the appetizer. And the Shack is you can read it as a story. And the beautiful thing was that I had no idea that anybody else but friends and family would ever care about it. So that's a whole thing by itself, because it didn't cross my mind one time to publish it. And that became, you give your kids a book for Christmas. It's kind of like, thanks, Dad. I mean, we'll get right on that, So it took them a while to read it, but my friends were all over it, and that started this whole chain reaction. The book is also a metaphor. The Shack stands for the house on the inside that people help you build. It's the soul or the heart of a human being, and a lot of us, we didn't get good help. I'm thrilled when I hear stories of father-son relationships that are good and solid, that someone grew up inside an environment that was wonderful and embracing and really freed someone up to do wonderful things. But that didn't happen. My dad was broken before I got there. His dad had busted him pretty good. And in my short time tonight, I want to introduce you to a man who became a pivotal person for me. And, when I'll tell you my three great sadnesses as a child. My relationship with my dad. He terrified me. And he didn't have the chip for being a dad. He just didn't. And I'm going to talk more about that in the devotional thing tomorrow about fathers and sons. So I'll talk about my dad tomorrow and where we're at now. The second great sadness was sexual abuse. It started inside the tribal culture before I was 5 years old. And the first nights at Christian boarding school, the big boys would come and molest the little boys. And there's nothing quite like that kind of loss in terms of tearing the fabric of a human soul. The third one is belonging, which is the third culture kid, missionary kid, military kid, international business kid. It's our deal. Unless we find someone to belong to, we never belong anywhere. And so belonging becomes a really critical thing. So what I did with all my shame is that I took, because the house on the inside is the shack, and that's the place where you then store all your addictions, you hide all your secrets. It becomes the place of shame. It's where you keep all your lies, and you're terrified that somebody might come in there and end up hating you as much as you already do. And so, especially firstborn missionary kid, preacher's kid, we take a piece of our timber, of our inside soul, and we drag it 100 yards out in front of the shack, and we set up a little facade that we can paint as fast as we can pick up people's expectations. And we learn to be performers. We live from the outside in, but we're a different thing in every given situation. My question then becomes, what do you want me to be? I'll please you if you can just tell me. And we're that way with God. Just tell me how much is enough. Is it going to be more prayer? Is it going to be more giving? Is it going to, what's enough? And when will I win your affection and your approval? That was my search in my relationship with my dad. It becomes my search in my relationship with God. But I become a performer and an adapter because I'm a third culture kid. And it turns out that I'm pretty smart and I'm pretty creative. I didn't think that growing up. I just thought I fooled people. But my intelligence and creativity actually empowered my ability to hide. And some of us are so broken, thank God we get caught. Because for some of us, there's no other hope for us. Because we're so good at hiding, and sometimes we'll take the last way to run away. Suicide isn't hitting the bottom. Suicide is the last way to run away so that you don't hit the bottom. So I performed well. I married a woman who saved my life. And that's the grace of God. But thankfully, I didn't marry a meek, mild, submitted Christian woman. I married the wrath of God. And I think the wrath of God is an expression of the love of God. And I tell you, I read the books about love, and so I knew how to be a good dad and be a lot better than mine, and I knew how to be a good husband. I'd read the books, but it wasn't because it was coming from the inside out. I was trying to perform it from the outside in. My whole world blew up. I'm 38 years old. Matthew's born, who is about to turn 22. We've been married for a bunch of years, and I get one sentence phone call from my wife, Kim. And the sentence is, I'm waiting for you at your office, and I know. And all my facade comes tumbling down because what she knew was I was in a 3-month affair with one of her best friends. And that's when I had to make the choice, do I face her? Or do I make the last run? Because I'm done. I was done. I was exhausted. You spin the story and you spin the facade and you keep spinning the lies. It's absolutely exhausting. And I didn't even know who I was. Still don't know how I made it across town. I walk into my office that she has already taken apart. And she lights into me. This is a Minnesota, North Dakota girl, right? There's no 50 shades of nothing. If she was designing all those clothes, it'd be black or white, So, and her 5 sisters are called the Force. May the Force be with you. A few hours into the first conversation, I got a word in. And I said to Kim, if we're going to do this, I need to tell you every secret I have, because secrets have been killing me my whole life. And naively, she said, bring it on. And it took me days. And it destroyed her. And she said, I'll never believe another word that comes out of your mouth the rest of your life. And I believed her. We were having this conversation not long ago with Matthew, who's about to turn 22. And Kim looks at him and says, do you know why I let your dad stay in the house? And he said, I think it was partly because you didn't want the kids to grow up without a father. And she said, that was part of it. But the real reason is that he owned it. As furious as I was, and she was for a few years, it took her and I 11 years to heal completely, 11 years. But as furious as she said, as furious as I was, he didn't point a finger at me. He didn't point a finger at his abuse. He didn't point a finger anywhere. He owned it. And I did. I hit the bottom. And when you hit the bottom, you lose control. You have to give it up. And you have to let somebody in. And I did. I want to tell you about Scott Mitchell in the last 7 minutes that I have here. When I hit the bottom, I knew I needed help, which I'd never asked for. There was no guys in my life. There was, I knew a lot of people, but I was a performer. I couldn't take the risk that somebody would get past the facade and hate me to my face as much as I already did. So I let go control. Kim didn't ask me to do this, but I went over and remember the yellow pages? Remember those things? I picked up the yellow pages and I opened it up under counseling and I started with the A's and I worked my way down. And my eye caught on Agape Youth and Family Services, specializing in sexual abuse histories. And I called him up and made an appointment. Byron Kaler did the intake. And he says, I got the guy for you, I think. You can decide for yourself. And he introduces me to Scott Mitchell. Now, you understand, I pulled this off of the yellow pages, right? And I'm now sitting in front of Scott Mitchell, who's maybe a year or two older than me. And for the first time in my life, I say to another human being, can you help me? And I said, I don't need somebody asking me how I feel about this. I need to know, can you get me from A to Z? And Scott says, yes. But it's going to take a year and a half. I said, I'm in. He said, everybody says they're in when they're sitting where you are. And everybody bails out after a couple months because they feel better about themselves and they feel a little bit more in control, and they bail out right before the really hard stuff. Here's the other reason that I know that I'd hit the bottom. I no longer thought I was smarter than the person that I was sitting across from. And I said, Scott, I'm done. I'm not leaving until you tell me that I'm done. I'm not leaving until you tell me I'm done. And we started working. Every day that I was with Scott, I'd call Kim, and every day she'd say the same thing. Yeah, right, whatever. That was okay because I knew I couldn't heal myself. Why would I think I could heal her? I thought she's going to be like this the rest of our lives. She's not going to believe one thing that changes, and why should she? Why should she? A couple months into it, it got really hard, like Scott had predicted. So hard that I lost all my hope, standing on the abyss looking at all my crap. And I'm thinking, I don't even know if there's one thing that's actually real about me. What's not a survival mechanism or a safety skill? What do you want me to do? Go back to before I'm 5 years old and figure out what's real? I lost my hope and I started planning a trip to Mexico City because the last good thing that Paul Young could do was make sure that he kills himself somewhere far enough away that his kids wouldn't find his body. My world gets intercepted. I go back to Scott. I tell him what's going on. We work hard. 9 months into this, he says, you're done. He says, we've never had anybody that's stuck with it and worked this hard. And he and I become friends over a course of years. His family doesn't know about me because I'm this client thing, patient thing, you know. I don't know about his family because the same reason. But he and I would connect and connect and connect. Well, what I didn't know was that Scott's son had become a methamphetamine addict. And Scott loves his son, and his son loves his dad. And he was living with his parents, Scott's trying to help him out of this for a couple years. And one night he says to the guys in his men's group, he says, I am so desperate for my son, I'd die for him if it would free him from this addiction. If you know anything about meth, it's a disaster addiction. Well, there was this one day, and the fact it was that night, after he told the guys in his Bible study group, he gets home, and he didn't know that his son had bought a .22 pistol, and his son, not to really hurt anybody, but probably to stick something up in order to feed the addiction. And he was at the house, and a woman drives up to the house, and there was a restraining order against her because she was a conduit to the meth. And Scott also didn't know that his son had tried to sell the gun back to the people he bought it from off the street, and they wouldn't take it. And he happened to have it with him when the son did, and his son goes out to talk to the gal, and Scott goes out to talk to both of them and says, look, you know you're not supposed to be here to her because there's a restraining order against you, and I need to call the authorities. I have to do that. And looks at his son, he says, you're an adult. You need to decide what you're going to do here right now. You can go with her. I'm not going to stop you. Or you can come back in the house. And his son indicates he's going to go with this woman. And Scott turns around and goes back into the house. And out of habit, locks the door behind him as he goes through, not realizing his son is barefoot. And so his son was going back into the house to get his shoes up the stairs in his bedroom so that he could leave with the woman. Well, when his son finds that the door is locked, he has this little fit of fury, takes the butt of the gun that it's in his waistband, smashes through the window, and the concussion is loud enough and the caliber small enough that he doesn't realize it goes off and goes right through Scott's heart, the bullet. And Scott's at the bottom of the stairs, falls into the living room. His son goes in there, goes upstairs, gets his sandals, comes back down and leaves with the woman, not knowing his dad is dying feet away from him. And I get the call in the fall of 2004 that Scott has been shot and killed by his own son. And I'm so wrecked that I didn't even go to the memorial service. I couldn't do it. 2004, that's the 11th of my years, and partly because of Scott, 2005 clicks over, and I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I have no addictions left. I'm not talking just porn. I'm talking about pleasing my dad or doing something great for God. You know, those kind of addictions too. And I've got no secrets. There's nothing in my world that Kim doesn't know, or my children don't know, or my friends don't know. And I'm the same person in every situation when I'm in a hotel room by myself or playing with my grandbabies. In 2005, I finally feel whole enough as a human being to write a story for my kids for Christmas on the train to one of my 3 jobs called The Shack. And I give it to them at Christmas, and all this takes off, and people start writing me emails, and I get an email at the end of the next year, and it just says, like a lot of them started off, you don't know me, but. And this one says, you don't know me, but I really felt compelled to write you an email and tell you how your little book has landed in the middle of my family's great sadness. You see, in September 2004, our oldest son shot and killed the father he loves, Scott Mitchell. And I look, and it's Connie, and she doesn't know. And I type an email and say, Connie, can I talk to you? Can you give me your phone number? And she sends it back, and I call her, and I say, Connie, you need to know something. If it wasn't in part for Scott, I wouldn't be alive. This book would never have been written. And she says to me, Paul, when you asked for my phone number, I turned to my brother-in-law who was standing next to me, and I said, I wonder if Paul is one of Scott's boys. I'm one of Scott's boys. A man who stepped into my world and helped me unravel the kind of damage that was in it. Not only were things stolen from me as a child, I then turned around and broke things. And God was in all of it. Jesus was in all of it. Scott's son next year gets out of 10 years for manslaughter. I get a text from Connie at Mother's Day. She went to visit him, Snake River Valley Correctional Institution in Eastern Oregon. And she says, Paul, I walk into the prison. My son is clean. It's what Scott wanted. I see a guard coming down the hallway. He's got the shack under his arm. I look in the first prison cell, and the prisoner's reading it, and the guard down at the end is leaned back in a chair reading the shack. The story is not over. This is a God who is good all the time, who climbs into our messes and begins to find a way to grow living things inside all the dead that we bring to it. And he does it inside relationship, because this is a God who's never been alone. And we're created in the image of a God who's never been alone. Amen, brothers. Thank you.